Welcome to the Trip Tales podcast with me, Kelsey Graves. Let's jump into a new episode exploring a vacation destination that you'll want all the details about. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 36 of Trip Tales. If you are someone who listens to these episodes chronologically, last week I told you that the next episode would be Park City, Utah. However, you guys, I have been so sick with a cough and not much of a voice, as you can hear, so I haven't been able to record that episode yet, but it will be coming very soon. I'm still blaming all this junk I have on the Disney cruise. If anyone is new to the podcast and just jumped into recent episodes, they're going to be like, what is wrong with this girl? She's been sick for like 3 weeks. I failed to mention in my Disney cruise episode that on top of everything else that went wrong, pretty much my entire family left the ship with some sort of cold, cough, COVID maybe. I don't really know, but this segues perfectly into today's episode. So after I posted my Disney cruise Instagram stories and podcast episode, it's episode 34 if you haven't listened to it yet, where I shared a raw and honest review of our time on the Disney Wish. Spoiler alert, we did not love our Disney cruise as much as we had expected to. I received multiple messages and comments from people about how trips gone wrong could be a fun series. Shout out to my friend Joanna from the Wonderland on Points podcast, who voice memoed me and said, wait, I can't help but think on your podcast, Trip Tales, you should have a series of episodes called Trip Fails. It even rhymes, Trip Tales, Trip Fails. So this week we are officially kicking off our first Trip Fails episode. Now, let me say that I do not want to bash and trash companies or resorts, but vacations are precious. Taking time off can be hard to come by, not to mention the thousands of dollars we fork over for these trips. So I think a bit of truth-telling and honesty is important, especially around places that have a ton of glowy, positive, influencer-fueled reviews, when maybe the reality isn't quite so bright and shiny. And these episodes are just one person's opinion. Tons and tons of people love Disney cruises. I happen to have a different experience and perspective, and that's okay. But when I started sharing my honest and true feelings, I had many people DM me saying, oh my gosh, we felt the same way. We also learned we aren't cruising people. And others who said, okay, I've been on the fence about a Disney cruise, but the reasons I haven't pulled the trigger are the exact reasons you shared about. I think this has helped us make our decision. So the point of Trip Fails is for my guests to share about their real experience at a destination in the hopes that it helps give you a bit more information to aid in your own decision-making and planning and potentially save you from spending your precious vacation time and money on something that might not be as great as it seems. Last bit of housekeeping. If you have a great Trip Fails story that you'd like to share on the podcast, email me at triptalespodcast@gmail.com and tell me about it. Okay, let's get into it. Today, I am joined by one of my best friends in the whole world. We've been besties since freshman year at Carmel High School in Indiana, so this is such a treat. Welcome to the podcast, Danae.
Thank you, Kelsey. Thanks for having me.
I start every episode with a rapid fire get to know you, so tell everyone where you live, what you do, and about your family.
So I live in Franklin, Tennessee. I'm thrilled to live in the same town as you yet again. We have a family of 4. I have a son who is 8 and a daughter who is 7.
And a lovely husband.
And a lovely husband.
I just put a cough drop in my mouth. So sorry, everybody, if it sounds a little weird, but I think that'll be better for my voice. Danae's husband was actually on last week's episode, the Steamboat episode. So I'm just tapping all my friends to be my podcast guests. But luckily, I have lots of friends who love to travel. So it works out great. Danae and I had originally discussed having her on the pod to share about her family's trip to Jackson Hole in Yellowstone. But she was one of the people who messaged me after the Disney cruise episode and said she too had her version of a trip fail and wondered if I'd be open to switching it up. So today we are going to be talking about your family's spring break trip to the super popular beaches, Turks and Caicos, often touted as one of the best family all-inclusive resorts. You guys went for a week in March 2023. So tell everyone why you booked this trip in the first place.
So here, I feel like I need to say, I do not want to be the poster child of a trip fails, like not really a badge of honor I was looking for. However, I listened to your Disney Wish honest review. And even though, as you said, we're best friends and we talk all the time, I gleaned so much information from your honest review and podcast that I felt compelled to share our super honest experience with beaches.
Wait, pause. She listened to the Disney Wish episode and felt so compelled by the information that she canceled a Disney cruise. So we
Yeah.
are really moving and shaking things up over here.
Yes. Yeah, I was already on the fence about Disney cruise, but I was genuinely going because of your first two Disney Wish podcasts. And I was like, okay, let's do this. But yeah. So to back to your question, why did we decide to go on this trip? When I was growing up, my family of origin, we went on a lot of tropical vacations. Like that was the default. I have so many great memories with my brothers and on beach trips and snorkeling and scuba diving and all the like. So in March of 2023, my son was 7, my daughter was 5. It was spring break and we were thinking, okay, like maybe it's time to get them passports and go somewhere outside of the country. And I had seen Beaches, Turks and Caicos touted on social media a lot. A lot of influencers go there and share, this like glamorous, amazing reel about Beaches, Turks and Caicos. And so it appeared to be very family friendly and stunningly beautiful island. And it is a stunningly beautiful island for sure. But that's why we chose beaches.
Okay. Yeah, I do feel like there's a tricky component of travel influencing. And I've been on the other side of it where influencers are given a free vacation. They also have signed a contract that they're going to share certain things. The contracts are large. So somewhere in there, there's all the no indemnification, like no, of course, you're not going to like share all the ugly sides. And so it's really tricky because you kind of have to make it look bright and shiny because you got this free vacation, but then it's not really fair to the people that are like, wait, I paid good hard money for this, and this is not what I'm seeing. So,
Mm-hmm.
anyways, let's get into the vacation. How did you guys get to Turks and Caicos?
So we flew to Turks and Caicos from Nashville. There was a transfer. There was no direct flight from Nashville. I was able to book them through Chase Points. So on the way there, we flew American Airlines through Philly. That was only, and then from Philly to Turks and Caicos, it was only 3 hours. So it's really quite easy to get to. And I had anticipated the immigration process to be a bit of a mess. I had prepped my children, 5 and 7 at the time. I had like bought a special pack of gummy bears to like wait until we got to the immigration line in Turks and Caicos to give them to them so they could like wait in line and be patient. And it was so easy. And I had built it up in their heads that they were like, oh my gosh, Mom, this is amazing. Because, it's very tropical. Like people are a lot more laid back, super easy peasy. And then to jump ahead, the flight home, we flew home United and we went through Washington Dulles. And I will say, any international flights, I will try to avoid coming back into the United States through Washington Dulles because that immigration process was a hot mess. And we waited in line I was wishing I kept the gummy bears for the whole week because we waited in line for hours and almost missed our flight back to Nashville.
I haven't been to the Dulles airport in as long as I can remember, but I am starting to consider getting the clear
I
situation because
know.
I have been in airports where I'm watching all these people walk through customs and immigration. And I'm like, wait, whatever price that is seems worth it.
100%. I agree with you.
And some of the credit cards actually like pay for it or something. So check your credit cards. Like some of the higher Chase cards and Amex cards actually provide some of that stuff for free. So look into that. Okay. Once you got through immigration and it was easy peasy in Turks and Caicos, how did you get from the airport to the resort?
So Beaches Resort has a complimentary round trip shuttle. And it's only 15-minute ride. So it's super easy. They're there waiting for you. And that part was a breeze.
Yeah. So everything's looking good so far.
Great.
Beaches is a massive property with a lot of different areas. So explain what room you booked and previous to staying there, did you have any idea what these different areas were like, or how did you pick the area? Because there's so many to choose from. Hey, Trip Tales listeners, I'll keep this short. If you're loving the podcast, leaving a review or buying me a coffee is the quickest way to show your support, and it will ensure that these amazing trip stories keep coming. Leave a review wherever you are listening to this podcast, or buy me a coffee at the link in the show notes, and I'll literally do a happy dance when it comes through. Okay, back to the show.
Yes. So a little about me and my travel vibe. I can be a last minute booker and I can be very spontaneous. So I love to look into things. I love to listen to your podcasts. I love to hear about other people's trips. But when it comes to action on our own family trips, a lot of times it could be last minute. So I booked this trip in January and we left in March.
This is why we're best friends, because we're opposites attract.
Exactly. So I didn't have every option available to me in terms of the type of rooms and the location of rooms. So as you mentioned, beaches is huge. Beaches, Turks and Caicos, I should say. Can I just say beaches from now on?
Yeah,
To make it
we all
easy?
know we're
Okay.
talking about Turks and Caicos.
It is huge. There are four primary villages, as I think they would call them. So there's French, Italian, Caribbean, and Key West. We booked the French Village Luxury King, which had a king bed for my husband and I and a trundle bed for our kids. So a trundle bed is there's a single bed and then you pull out another single bed under it. So it was seemingly great in
Yeah, very
terms
family
of
friendly.
very family friendly for a family of four. I have a neighbor friend who also went to beaches, Turks and Caicos. And prior to us going, I shared with her, like, oh my gosh, we just booked beaches. We're so excited. And it was the first indication that maybe the vacation was going to be different than expectations because her face literally fell.
She was like, oh,
Correct. She was like, oh, wait, did you already fully book it? And I was like, yeah. You know,
do you have any cancellation policies left?
and I was like, yes, I would love to hear your favorite restaurants where you stayed. And I could just tell she was trying to be measured in her response. And come to find out, she had a very similar experience as us. They stayed in the Key West area, and that location is actually nicer. It's more updated. Each room has a butler. Oftentimes it's like more of like a townhouse type thing, multiple bedrooms, a family room, a kitchen. So it was interesting to hear her experience as well as ours. And there are some specific themes that even though we stayed in different locations and had a different accommodation, there were similar themes to our experiences at the resort.
Yeah, I was looking up the different villages in my research, and it said that Key West was the newest. So that
Mhm.
is the most recent to be built. So that would feel the nicest. And that one has like more beachfront options in terms of those villas that can be like 3 stories and have a full kitchen and a private pool. But those are like even more expensive. And like just the regular rooms are so expensive. I also heard that the Caribbean village is the oldest. And like even on like travel agent websites, they'll be like, that one's looking pretty dated. So it's like known that some of these areas are looking dated and showing its age. I was reading that the French village where you stayed is the furthest from the beach, but the closest to Pirate Island Water Park and center stage where the Sesame Street characters perform. And I just started laughing because I'm like, I just like can't picture you sitting at center stage with like Cookie Monster.
Oh, I was center stage with Cookie Monster. The French Village Luxury King Room was smaller than expected and was very dated and run down.
Like noticing things like little rusty areas or just old
Yes.
furniture, dings in the wall.
Yes, nicks in the tile floor. Yeah, just it had been well used throughout the years and not updated.
I remember when you booked this trip and you were so excited, but you said, I think you were like on a trip, a road trip coming home from somewhere, and you like did it on your phone. And you said you closed your eyes and hit book because the price point was so high. You were a little like, what are we doing? But we've just got to come up with a plan. Spring break's right around the corner. And you guys travel a lot internationally, ski trips. You aren't new to the price of great trips by any means. So if you feel comfortable, can you share what it was just booking this room? Granted, it's an all-inclusive, so food and drinks are included, but what that price was you paid for your 7 nights at beaches.
Yes. It was $21,910.
Holy, I'm going to try not to cuss on my own podcast. Holy cannoli. Okay, wait. When I asked you, I sidebar texted Danae and was like, can you get the number? Because I want to be able to share this so people know. And she's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. In my brain, the number you were going to say was $7,000.
Oh my God. Now, I will say I have gone
Triple,
on.
triple.
I know. It's great. It's really great to be an example of trip fails. You're right. We travel a lot. We tend to stay at more luxury places. Like I am willing to wear, lower price clothing in order to go on amazing vacations. That's just how I like to spend my money. And so we will go to the Four Seasons or St. Regis or the Ritz. Yes, it's a lot of money to go to beaches. To your point, it's all inclusive. And I'll talk a little bit more about really what all inclusive meant in terms of beaches definition. So it was a lot of money, but I assumed it was going to be worth it when I booked it. I will say I have gone on their website and they often have promotional packages like 30% off or 40% off rack rate, things like that. To my earlier point, I tend to book things last minute.
This was the last minute rate.
Yeah. But well, I think it's their regular rate, but they do often have promotional packages.
Okay.
I will say, even if it was 40% off, it still wasn't worth it.
Okay, so tell us about arriving to the resort. You get in the shuttle, you arrive to the resort. Are you immediately noticing that things are a little off, or is everything still seeming a little bright and shiny on arrival day?
So when we first arrive, they take you into a place to check in. They give you a welcome drink and they check you in. That process was fine. It was nothing, it was fine, right? It wasn't good nor bad. It was just fine. I think things really sunk in when we got to our room and we were like, oh,
This is
and
our home for
then
7 nights.
correct. And then when we went to our first dinner, that's when the bubble 100% burst.
Do you remember the first dinner?
Vividly.
Where was it?
I think it was Mario's Italian restaurant.
Okay. And can you just go wherever you want, or do you have to make reservations, or do you just kind of show up places?
On their website, they say they have 18 restaurants and 3 food trucks. So 21 total dining options. And looking through them again, I'm like, yeah, I guess there were that many. In my head, when we were there, it didn't seem like there were that many options, but all of these restaurants truly were there. It is massive, and there are tons of people there. The vast majority of the restaurants, there are no reservations required, so you can just walk up. I will also say this isn't clear on the websites, but the vast majority of the restaurants are buffet style. So there aren't very many where they take your order. There are maybe
For
two.
$21,000, you do not get a waiter.
Correct. I think there's maybe 2 restaurants where they want reservations and it's adults only or children ages 12 and up, something like that. So it's a little bit more of a nicer dining experience.
So you walk in, you're like trying to find a table, like you're in a cafeteria, and you go up and just look for something that looks appetizing.
You don't even get a table at first. You walk in and you get in line with 40 other people who are in line
Like
holding an
first
empty
grade
plate.
lunch.
So my husband compared it to going to sleepaway camp and you're waiting for the camp mess hall to be
The
opened
mess hall, yes.
and go through the line and pick out what you'd like to eat.
Wow.
I remember that first day and expectations were high. We were so excited. The room, we were like, oh, okay, all right, let's, find the pools. And, then we went to dinner and I looked behind me in the line for the buffet and this woman looked completely shell-shocked. And she was like, I cannot believe this is what we paid for. And she had just arrived that evening too. And we kind of had a moment of a bonding moment of like, oh, well, this isn't exactly what we were picturing things would be. I feel a little bit vindicated that it wasn't just our experience.
Yeah. And even like all inclusives are known to not always have the best food, but plenty have good food. Like Danae and I went for my 40th birthday to an all inclusive in Riviera Maya, Cancun area called Atelier. And the food was good. Like lots of
Mhm.
restaurants you could sit down at, servers, lots of good sushi, pastas. Like it's not Michelin star, but it's good. Whereas this sounds like, you're not even getting that like service of a restaurant. You're walking through a cafeteria line.
Listen, like I can flex a high level, low level in terms of food, right? Like we can have fine cuisine or chicken tenders and realizing the environment and being like, okay, maybe we just like down gear a little bit and we just, our expectations were then set. However, there were moments like we went to the sushi restaurant and it was so bad. We just didn't even eat it because we were like, it's not worth getting sick. But here we are in this beautiful island surrounded by fish. Like we thought, okay, maybe sushi would be a better option. The one shout out I will say is that the best meal we had was at Kimonos, which is a hibachi restaurant. And that was interactive. It was fun. There was service included, and it was a typical hibachi meal with protein, rice, veggies, etc. And that I would say is a standout. Otherwise, I don't think we had any highlights from a culinary perspective. We did learn later into the week that there's a few restaurants in that Key West area that you mentioned that have better quality food. They are still buffet style, but it seemed to be a little bit better.
That is crazy that all the restaurants are buffet style.
Yeah,
And there's nothing worse than bad sushi. Like that's one of the absolute worst
exactly.
things. Like I've definitely been places where I'm like, I am not putting that in my mouth because
Right.
that looks wrong. Like I've eaten enough
Smells
sushi to know,
wrong.
yeah, nope. Okay, so food takes a hit. Okay, let's move on to activities. A big thing that is touted on Beach's website is that all the activities, like you were saying, are included for like unlimited fun for your family. So there's like water slides and water sports and banana boat rides, snorkeling, paddleboarding, kayaking, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on. There's the kids' clubs and entertainment every night. So tell us what this was like IRL in real life.
I am the type of person that whatever resort I go to, the very first thing I do is look at what is going on at the resort the days we're there. Like when is yoga? When, are there kids activities? Like I love a good activity calendar. So this was a big reason why we also thought beaches was going to be a great destination for us. In reality, there is a lot of activities listed on their website, as you mentioned. A lot of them were unavailable during our stay. And the weather was seemingly perfect, like calm seas, bright, beautiful, sunny days, not super high winds. And the way they had it organized is that every morning you had to wake up and go down to a shack by the beach to sign up for some of these popular activities. There were a few exceptions in which you could sign up ahead of time, like scuba diving. Obviously, with my children, ages 5 and 7, we weren't scuba diving on this trip, but there were a lot of people who did go scuba diving, and scuba diving is included, which is I am a scuba diver, and that is incredible to have a place have all of that included. However, with my family and kids, we wanted to do like a glass bottom boat ride or kayaking or windsurfing or paddleboarding, banana boat rides, whatever,
You're like
all of
any
those other
any of
things.
them, any of the options.
Basically, there's 15 listed here.
Yeah.
What can we do? So, as you mentioned, the French Village was far away from the beach, but we would wake up at like 7 a.m. just to get down there to get in line. Again, another line to talk to the people at the beach shack about what activities were available and to sign up for a time. So the good news was we could go down there without the children, and one of us, we would just alternate days of who would go. Without fail, for whatever reason, the popular ones, every time they would say that the conditions weren't right and they weren't offering those activities that day. We were there 7 nights. And they did not offer the activities. So it felt a little bit like a bait and switch. We did not have bad weather when we were there. Perfect day, still waters. We were able to swim. There was one day in which we did get out on a sailboat. We were so excited. It was maybe the last full day we had there. We were so pumped. We got out, and within 10 minutes, one of the cords that held
The
um,
sail.
the sail up snapped,
Oh my gosh.
and the sail flew into the water, and then of course started to get full of water, and so it was like sinking the sail because it was taking on water. We were fine. We weren't going to, our boat wasn't going to sink, but it was a moment of like, oh my goodness. And there was somebody from beaches on the boat, thankfully, but he was frantically trying to get the sail out of the water, calling for help. Another boat had to come save us.
Oh my gosh, that's so traumatic. You're like, finally, we get an excursion, and then you're like sinking in the Turks and Caicos Sea.
Yes, I was never afraid for our well-being, but
But it's also like not fun and enjoyable and relaxing.
to me, it highlighted the fact that the boats or equipment that they were using wasn't really either well kept, well maintained, and up to what I would consider a safe experience. Because, like I said, it was a beautiful day. There weren't crazy winds or conditions, but the cable snapped. And
So
so, and
then
it
when
just
the other
seemed,
boat came to rescue you, did they just take you back to shore and they were like, never mind? Or did they take you around a little while on the other boat?
no, they just took us back to shore.
Gosh, were you and Paul like, what is happening?
Kind of. I mean, at this point, like I said, this was probably the last full day we were there. At this point, we saw the humor in it, and we were just
Yeah.
like, "Well, it's an adventure." I love adventure. My son does too. My daughter, who was 5 at the time, was a little like, "Oh my gosh." She was a little freaked out and scared, but the rest of us were like, "Well, now we have a story that like I was genuinely still thrilled we got out on the water."
Yeah. After all the attempts.
Yes.
Okay. Excursions out on the water did not go so well because they were just not available to you guys. What about the pools and hanging around kind of like the water slide pool areas?
So our typical day was waking up, going to breakfast,
At a
going to the
buffet.
pools at a buffet. We went to the pools, as you mentioned. There's a lot of pools there. As you mentioned, where our room was, we were very close to a main pool. I would say it was more of like a party vibe pool, music pumping, a large bar. So, because it was all included, there was also all included alcohol. So, it tended to attract families, but also adults. The pools did, different ones had a little bit different vibes. This one was big, and I would say it attracted like a lively environment. It was also very close to the water park. And the water park had water slides and things like that attracted the children. So we would go typically back and forth between those pools. And the chair claiming game was strong at beaches. There was a lot of people. And so people would want to claim beach chairs. And if you didn't use them for a while, the staff would come and take the towels if there wasn't like personal items left on there. And so other people would claim them. So having beach chairs was also kind of an ordeal.
You had told me that the kids had a heyday at the swim up bar because at the swim up bar, in addition to adults being able to order alcohol, kids could order like smoothies and virgin pina coladas. So, how many sugary drinks did your kids have on this trip?
Oh, at this point, when we were like, okay, here we are, this is what it is, like we did not try to limit our children in terms of soft serve ice cream, virgin pina coladas or daiquiris. Like we were like, let's go, let's like have a
It was
good
a free for
time.
all.
It was a bit of a free for all. We always tell our kids, be reasonable, but we were like, let's just have a good time also. The pools were pretty run down. They also needed some TLC and upkeep.
That's how I felt at Atlantis when we went on the Disney cruise. And I
Mm.
feel like beaches, Turks and Caicos was probably built around the same time as Atlantis. I might have that wrong, but I feel like when we were growing up, like in junior high, high school is when all these properties were like so super popular. And some of them just haven't been kept up and they are keeping up that like super popular vibe, but they're not giving it the renovations that they need.
Right. Yeah. Some upkeep is needed.
Okay, what was the entertainment like? Is it really Sesame Street all the time? Is there other stuff going on? Like, what's going on with the entertainment stage and all that?
Yes. So Sesame Street is a large partner. They do have like a Sesame Street parade and different shows that are more geared towards children. I would say earlier in the evenings. They also had other things, other entertainment, maybe a little bit later in the evening. So one of the nights that we had particularly good time at was reggae night. My kids weren't really that exposed to reggae before this trip, and my son like loved it and he was jiving. We were also there for St. Patrick's Day, and they had a huge St. Patrick's Day parade, and that was actually really, really fun. Everybody got super into it. They were throwing candy and like green hats, and there was just that was a really fun themed night. The entertainment team, I think, did a really good job. Another reason we chose beaches was that they have all-included kids club. And we hadn't been to a resort where you could just drop your kids off at any given time and there wasn't added fees and things like that. And so Paul and I felt like, oh, this could give us a lot of freedom to also have some adult time. Maybe we could go to the spa or whatnot to have a kids club where our kids were excited to go to. Our children are very social. They like to be around other kids. They love activities similar to me. They did not like the kids club here at all. I think they went once for like an hour or two and they were like, Mommy, please don't ever make us go there again.
You're
So
like,
that was quickly
okay,
off the
that's
table.
done. Yep.
Correct.
I think that kind of segues into one of your biggest pain points, which is the service. I'm assuming probably the service at the kids club, they picked up on that, like that maybe the people working them weren't super excited to be caring for kids or whatnot. And that's a huge part of it. I mean, on the Disney cruise, the service was phenomenal. And the people working those kids clubs are so top notch that the kids just want to go back because they're running these fun games and they remember their names and all that kind of stuff. So, talk a little bit about the service overall throughout the resort.
Yeah. So I would say this would be my headline for anybody thinking about going to beaches, Turks and Caicos. My number one key takeaway was that the service was just off. The staff seemed miserable and don't treat the guests in a way where they are, happy to see them or joyful or things like that. So I get it if nobody can necessarily control, the staff can't control if there has been investment in keeping up the pools or the rooms or renovations. I get that. And I can completely have a great time at a more rundown resort. What doesn't cost anything is smiles or grace in your interactions with guests. There was very few, if any, smiles. It felt like they were all, as I said, miserable being there. And, it kind of created this atmosphere of you just kind of felt down
You're
and
like, I'm so
bad in
sorry I'm
interacting
here.
with them.
I'm sorry that I'm in your space.
Correct. And so I kind of tried to swing it the other way where I was so joyful and happy and showed gratitude and smiled at everybody. Good morning. Like there is this feeling of island life and there's so much beauty around you and just trying to have that island life carefree, excited, joyful perspective. And that was not reciprocated by the staff. They were not really willing and eager to help. They weren't particularly happy or joyful to interact with us. And this is from check-in to the food service to the bartenders to the game shack to the kids club, as you said. My children definitely picked up that the energy was off and they didn't want to spend time with people who seemed rather miserable to have them around. So I will say, as my friend who did stay in the Key West area, who had a butler, said that the butler staff is an exception to this. They were all very accommodating, very happy. They got to know the guests, their preferences, their names. They helped them out a lot more. The butlers are also the only people on staff who you are allowed to tip. So they are working for those tips.
That kind of stinks that you can't tip other people.
Yeah, it's out of policy. You're not supposed to
I
tip
do think
anybody.
it's because tips are supposed to be included, which is kind of nice, but also tipping's like a way that you really can show that gratitude towards people that are like having or giving top-notch service. So it kind of stinks that you're not allowed to. That's why they're so
Yeah,
miserable. Let the people tip, beaches.
yeah, exactly.
Well, that's a super bummer because I feel like of all the things on fancy vacations, service is like the number one thing you're paying for. And great service is just incredible. It makes the trip so amazing. And I don't know why I keep going back to the Disney cruise, but probably because that was the first official trip fail. And so this is the second one. But the thing about that is that the staff had smiles the whole time. They were just so gracious and so kind. And that made that trip like bearable. Whereas if they had been like rude or acting like they didn't want to be there, I would have been like, I'm literally never doing this ever again in my whole life. Like that's a super bummer.
Yeah, it seemed like there was a culture, right? It was pretty pervasive. So, and I think that that comes from management and, a service mentality. And like I said, yes, it's a culture of building with your staff, but it doesn't really cost anything. So I probably could have overlooked a lot of the other negative things if we had a good personal experience and felt welcome and joyful around the people around us. But all of it paired together just made an impression of like, wow, this is a uniquely terrible experience.
Well, with every trip fail, it isn't always all bad. So let's talk about a couple of the highlights. Turks and Caicos is a beautiful island overall. So, how was the beach and the water?
Absolutely gorgeous. Bright, clear, turquoise water. The beach is beautiful, fluffy sand. I would 100% go back to Turks and Caicos and stay somewhere else.
Yes. And then you had put in your notes that you guys had like a family photo shoot. Was this through the resort and something you booked through the resort?
Yeah, so one of the things Beaches offers is a free family photo shoot on the beach.
That's kind of
And
cool.
yeah, right? It was great. And so,
I feel like more resorts should offer that. I would be like, done. We get a vacation and family photos done. Perfect.
exactly. And it was so stunningly gorgeous on the beach. So I really treasure these photos that we have, even though it was a trip fail. So the way it works is you schedule a time with a photographer. They try to do it around sunset, and that is all included. And then you can go, I think the next day, they'll let you know that your pictures are ready for reviewing. You go to like the photo office and you can go through them, and you do pay for the digital files of the photos you want to buy. And they were not cheap. I forget exactly how much we paid, but I would say maybe $300 or $400. I
Yeah,
can't.
like $50 a photo or something.
It was I can't remember exactly what it was, but they were beautiful photos. So I
That
was
kind of
happy to
stinks.
pay for them.
I thought that it was going to all be included, but that is cool. Like at least you get the opportunity and then yeah, it's an incentive for them to take great photos and then you'll probably buy them if they're amazing.
Yeah, they were high quality and the photographer was great with us and our children. So that was good.
Yay. Photos of a trip fail.
Exactly.
Beautiful photos of a trip fail. Okay, you also had written down about a board game hut. Was this something you guys actually enjoyed?
Yeah. As I said, most of our days were pool hopping or being at the water park. And so because our kids refused to go to the kids club, after a while we were looking for other activities. We discovered this game hut, and it's not like video games, but it's a hut by one of the pools where they have every single board or card game that you could ever imagine. And that was something that we really enjoyed. You can take out two games at a time, and we would like sit by the pool and play Battleship or a card game or things like that just added a little variety because we were there 7 nights, 8 days. Like there was a decent amount of time that we were looking for just something different to do rather than just swim around with our kids. And we love games in our family. So that was really fun. They also do have one, those like life-size chess and checker boards. They have those scattered throughout the resort. And that became like a nightly tradition that my son and husband would go down and play chess and things like that.
Fun.
They also have golf, but we didn't do that. So I don't know if that
Like an
matters.
actual golf course, like 18
I
holes.
never saw it, but they talk about it on their website.
It's over with the banana boats and the kayaks that aren't being
Correct.
used.
That's right.
Well, we have a new closing question for our special trip fails episodes. So here we go. I end every trip fails podcast with, if someone listening is considering this trip, what is it about beaches, Turks and Caicos that would make you say, just don't book it?
The price point does not match the quality, and the service is off. They do not treat their guests as though they are happy for them to be there.
Well, I'm sorry that you had a trip fail because I know how it feels. It's such a bummer, but it's all an experience and it's memories and learning. And thank you for being a guinea pig on this first official trip fails episode. We'll have to have you back for a proper trip tales episode soon. Thank you for sharing your real and honest thoughts about beaches, Turks and Caicos, because I think this is going to help a lot of people out.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
That wraps up another episode of Trip Tales. If you have a trip you'd like to share about on the podcast, email me at triptalespodcast@gmail.com and I'll add you to the schedule. Also, be sure to follow the show so that you don't miss any upcoming vacation destinations. And if you have an extra minute in your day, please leave a review for the podcast. It helps more than you could imagine. Thank you so much, and I'll see you on the next episode of Trip Tales.